One, two, three.
The Local Youth Worker is a podcast brought to you by Reformed Youth Ministries. Since 1972, RYM has sought to reach and equip youth for Christ, and this podcast seeks to reach and equip those parents and youth workers who share that same desire. For more information on our student conferences, youth leader training, or resources, visit rym.org.
Hello, everyone. Welcome to The Local Youth Worker, a podcast brought to you by Reformed Youth Ministries. I'm your host, John Parrott. This is episode 381, and I'm here with Brett McCracken. Brett, how's it going?
Hey, John. Going well. Thanks for having me.
Absolutely. Yeah, I should have said welcome back. It's good to have you back on the show.
Yeah.
And Kurt Cooper is also with us. Kurt, how's it going?
Hey, John. Good to be back.
Yeah, and we are going to be talking about Bluey at the end of this episode in just a little bit. Tree and Scott will be talking about Insecurities of Life and Ministry, but I'm here right now with Brett and Kurt. And I did give y'all just a little bit of warning, but since we're going to be talking about a children's television show later in this episode, I thought it'd be good for us to share our favorite childhood television show. So I only gave you a couple of minutes to think about that. Kurt, you look pretty ready. You want to go for it?
Yeah, I have 4. So
oh man, okay.
I'd say I'm more than ready. Okay. So, and of course we're all close to the same age.
Mm-hmm.
There was no on-demand viewing. You kind of had to schedule your life around the show if you wanted to see it. And I wrote down 4 shows that I pretty much scheduled my life around at different points in my adolescence. Number 1 would be Scooby-Doo, just top rated show. Unbelievable. Great premise. Also, pretty formulaic as well. And also we named our intramural flag football team in college the Mystery Machine. So shout out to the Mystery Machine.
Yeah. Solid name there. That's good.
And great jerseys too. Not going to lie. It was good. I can't take credit for any of that, but it was fun. Our quarterback looked like Shaggy. That's where we got that. So number 2, G.I. Joe. Awesome show. Unbelievable. I wish that they had the life lessons at the end. Mm-hmm. That's where I learned not to play in an old refrigerator, how to tread water, not to take candy from strangers, all kinds of things you learn.
Knowing is half the battle. Kurt.
Yeah, it really is, honestly. And then He-Man, absolutely epic toys from He-Man, and Skeletor, He-Man, he has this crazy voice. And then lastly, Transformers. And I think might be the coolest one. There was several of these had movies, but Transformer movie, unbelievable. I think Optimus Prime might even die in the Transformer movie. Spoiler warning, that came out in the 80s. But so those 4 for sure, just I watched a ton of that.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah, I've got some overlap there as well on some of what I'll share. Brett, curious yours, and maybe a segue. What famous actor voiced the villain in Transformers? Do y'all remember this?
No, I don't know that. Famous actor, huh?
Mm-hmm.
I'm curious.
Orson Welles.
No way.
Orson Welles was Megatron?
Yeah. So
wow.
No. He was the other, like the big thing. I can't remember what it was. I want to say that might have actually been his last movie before he died.
What do you mean big thing? Megatron is the bad guy.
There's some kind of thing that like sucks everything in space. I just remember. Also,
I don't know if y'all remember this about Transformers, but Megatron just transformed into a giant gun. The rest of the Transformers, like they transformed into things that could like in some way camouflage them in life, but Megatron just transformed into a huge pistol. It's like, okay, I'm pretty sure that's an alien. Anyway, let's.
All right. Thanks for that, Kurt. I am checking. It is Orson Welles. Yeah, he was in
That's
there.
crazy.
So, yeah, it is. Go ahead, Brett. Sorry about that.
When I think about what I liked as a kid, I liked a lot of the shows that Kurt mentioned, but the ones that come to mind, and I have like memories of watching these like after school, like, you'd come home from school and watch cartoons,
Mm-hmm.
Rescue Rangers, Chippendale Rescue Rangers, and DuckTales. I just remember they might have been like back to back or something in the afternoons on weekdays or something, but I would always watch those shows after school. So I love, those Disney movies or Disney shows with like animal, whether ducks or, chipmunks.
Yeah,
Um,
Tailspin and Darkwing Duck. Those were kind of
yes, I
around
also
that
like
time
those.
too.
Yeah, same era, same kind of general feel.
DuckTales theme song, elite.
Yes.
Elite theme song, like just unbelievable theme song.
Oh, yeah.
And Scrooge McDuck diving into the gold coin.
We can all remember that image. Yeah. Who didn't want to do that? Diving
Yeah.
into the
Would
sea
have
of
killed
gold.
you, but
Yeah.
Would not have felt good, that's for sure. Yeah, those are good. And also, I mean, I'm thinking after school, Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles, that was one. I had G.I. Joe and Transformers on my list, and definitely I would say two of my favorite toys growing up. But I also had Fraggle Rock in there. I love Fraggle Rock. I'm glad to see some head nods. So just to our listeners, they're affirming my decision. But yeah, Fraggle Rock, just very creative. Jim Henson, I mean, classic. So those are some good ones.
before we leave this conversation, when you guys were a little bit older, when I was a little bit older, I would come home from school. Sometimes I took the bus, sometimes I got a ride from someone or wherever. But I would come home from school, and I guess I would have been in like 9th grade or 8th grade or 7th grade. The cartoon that was always on that I just started watching because it was on was the X-Men cartoon. Did y'all ever watch that one?
Yeah.
For sure.
I didn't even know about comic books. I don't think my parents sheltered me from it, but in any way, I just that wasn't my thing. But I discovered like superheroes via the X-Men cartoon. So that's another. And I was kind of surprised that there wasn't more Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtle talk. But I think we're all just a touch old for that, if I remember.
I know. I was a big Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtle fan. In
Yeah,
fact, I think the live action movies of those were some of the first movies I went to in the theater.
Vanilla Ice, go Ninja, go Ninja.
Ice.
Go.
Yes.
Come on.
Ooze,
man.
Secret of the Ooze.
Yeah, we could have a whole podcast on this.
This is turning into a nostalgia episode.
I know, just so many memories are now being conjured up, like crazy. It is interesting, I will say, just to kind of talk about how the differences of like kids entertainment today, the day and date thing of like you watched things at a certain time. We're talking about like afternoons after school, and like Saturday morning. You guys probably remember like Saturday morning cartoons was a whole thing.
For sure.
Like Friday night, like TGIF lineup on ABC. Those were like, that's what I remember with childhood TV is like certain, I associate it with time, like a time of day, a time of the week. And that's just gone. Like for my kids, for all of our kids' generation, there's none of that anymore, which is interesting.
Yeah. We were on vacation recently, and my 5-year-old son, he said he wanted to watch Bluey, and we said there was just like satellite TV there, and we said, well, Bluey's not on, and it just like kind of broke his brain a little bit. He was like, what do you mean Bluey's not on? It's just on all the time. And I was like,
so true.
Yeah.
No category for it. All right. Well, we need to go ahead and wrap this up. I do want to remind our listeners about RYM's Youth Leader Training. Registration is now open if you go to rym.org/YLT. Nancy Guthrie will be there, Sam Alberry, Kelly Kapik, among others. So I want to encourage people to sign up for that. Tree and Scott are going to be with me next, talking about insecurities of life and ministry. And then I'll continue my conversation with Kurt and Brett on the other side about Bluey. All right, everybody, I'm back once again with Scott Bird and Tree Triolo. I'm talking about insecurities of life and ministry. Last week we talked about just some of the roots and origins of insecurity. Today we're planning on talking a little bit more about some specific insecurities of youth workers. We hope this is helpful. To me, I think it's just encouraging to hear people talk about insecurities, just to be reminded that we're not alone. That so often, we're dealing with our insecurities internally, and it's just an isolating exercise, and to be able to talk about it in community, talk about it with you guys, it's hopefully helpful to our listeners. So, specific insecurities of a youth worker. Scott, Tree, who wants to start off with this one? I think Scott started us off last time. So Tree, you want to start us off?
I think rejection is a big one. I remember early in my youth ministry career getting so let down and so disappointed when like I would show up for a one-on-one and they wouldn't show up, or if I put a lot of time into a lesson and it keeps, just falling flat. I think we put ourselves out there, and then whether or not we get rejected per se, but it feels like a letdown. I think rejection is a big insecurity because it leaves us asking that question: do people like me? Am I accepted here? Do people want me to be here? So I think rejection is a big one.
Yeah, for sure. And because it's, if it's a program you put together, if it's a Bible study you're teaching, if nobody shows up to the program you're doing, if you're up there giving your lesson and you're just looking at like blank stares or students who are just falling asleep, you're thinking, okay, is it me? Am I the problem here? Why aren't people showing up to this? I mean, I put a lot of effort into this program, put a lot of thought behind it, praying about it, and then it just falls flat. Yeah, that's a massive one.
I think in youth ministry too, there's so many people to be rejected by. You've got you got parents, you've got students, you've got elders, you've got just other people that in the church that maybe they think they could do a better job. You got other staff. It seems like it's just you've got a lot of people kind of below you in authority and above you in authority that can reject you. So it seems like a pretty unique position, maybe in ministry to face rejection and maybe trying to seek approval from both of those people above and below you in authority.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
I think jumping off that, just the temptation to people please will feed into our insecurities because, like Scott said, there's so many competing voices, right? There's the students, there's the parents, there's the elders, there's the pastors, there's other members of the congregation, and everybody's got an opinion about how youth ministry should be run. And I think we can kind of get into a whirlwind when we start trying to okay, now I got to please these people, and these people. And then that just sends us into just a spiral of more fear and insecurity. So people pleasing is definitely a temptation that kind of plays into even more insecurity.
Would y'all say that's connected to burnout? Just the kind of constant trying to people please and meet the expectations that everybody has. I've heard the average time in a youth ministry for a youth pastor is like 18 months. And I would have to think some of that has to be they're burnout because they're trying to meet everybody's expectations. What do y'all think?
Yeah, 100%. Yeah, I would, totally agree with that. And I think, you're really getting at something. Something I've thought about a lot is just how many people you're overlapping, when you do youth ministry that, and I guess children's ministry would be similar. You're ministering to children or teenagers. And so that's your demographic you're focused on, but they're obviously connected to their parents. So you're interacting with their parents, sometimes their grandparents from the congregation. So you've got just a large swath of the congregation that you're involved in. And, senior pastors, associates, whatever, they're typically focused on the adults. Not solely, and I know people do that differently. But yeah, all that to say, 100%, you're trying to please a whole lot of people, and that would connect to burnout.
Mm-hmm.
True, it looks like you wanted to say something.
Yeah, I'm trying to think if I want to say this or not.
We can.
I think the 18 months thing that's really interesting. Partially because I've been at this church for 5 years, so it kind of makes me feel a little bit better. But at the same time, I've been at other places, and I was at a church for about 18 months, and I constantly was trying to please people, and that was exhausting and mentally taxing. So absolutely, I think it's definitely connected to burnout.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and kind of related to this whole, fear of man. I just kind of jotted down some things like justifying my existence. And some of this is overlapping with what we've already said, but working to appear competent and professional. And then something kind of underneath that is, youth ministry is a real job. It's like, how many times do we hear, is this your real job? Like, is this what you do full time, or is this kind of, you hear this typically from teenagers, and it's like, I'm trying to convince an eighth grader, hey, what I do matters, and this is important. And so you're trying to have that conversation.
I think for adults too, it's hard to try to, maybe they don't see it as like a legitimate job. It's kind of like, all right, when are you going to grow out of this youth ministry thing and do something more impressive? And yeah, I think that's definitely an insecurity.
Yeah. So, I try to convince people, look, I'm not just a glorified babysitter. I'm not just paid to, play games. Yes, I want to do those things and have fun and all that, but I also want to appear competent and thoughtful, and, what we're doing matters. It's not just kind of some optional kind of add-on during the week for your child. And so, it's like I'm working, and, some of this, it gets into, am I acting too much like a student for the parents to take me seriously? But then am I acting too much like a parent for the students not to want to like hang out and come to what we're doing? And so it's like you're walking this tightrope of, okay, becoming all things to all men, as in a sense. And so it's like when the parents aren't around, okay, I'll act like the teenager and try to make them laugh and try to appear cool, which is impossible for me. And then when the kids aren't around, trying to connect with the parents, and so you're constantly, just trying to connect and please people. And it's all out of, most of it is out of fear of how you're going to be perceived. Does that resonate with you guys, or is that just me?
Yeah. I kind of, in a different way, think about it. Like when I'm trying to convince, people that, lawyers and doctors and things like that, when I'm trying to prove my importance to them, I end up almost with a little chip on my shoulder, talking about how hard youth ministry is and kind of some of the horror stories and stuff like that. And it's almost like I'm trying to prove to them that my job is hard, when it's really, sometimes it is, but I love my job. Like there's a lot of great things about it. And I don't want to talk about that I get to go play golf with students and things like that, because that doesn't sound hard and respectable and that kind
suffering
of
for the Lord.
That's right. So, I feel like that happens a good bit with youth pastors, just trying to almost show how hard their job is, out of that insecurity.
Yeah. But even some of that, like, you bringing up the golfing example. I can remember just a pastor, taking a shot at some youth workers about doing that and just kind of mocking what they did as not real ministry. And I'm thinking, okay, that's a unique aspect to youth ministry, I think, because ministry is hard. Period. Doing ministry is hard, and there's, different challenges to each area of ministry. But it seems like, youth workers can get more shots from other ministers, and you just think that's kind of another level of frustration and hurt that can come from other ministers, making just mocking what it is you feel called to do. I don't know, again, if you guys have experienced anything like that or not.
Yeah, I don't know from other pastors I've experienced like people taking shots, but there's definitely the stereotypes of youth pastors that people like to pick on, those kinds of things. I'm thinking like Christian meme accounts, they're always blasting youth pastors like the Babylon Bee and stuff like that. But
Ignatius, the ultimate youth pastor.
Yeah.
That's an awesome video. If you haven't checked that out, to our listeners, go look up Ignatius. Let's just go ahead and say, some of that's deserved for sure.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
So going back a few minutes, we talked about being all things to all people, and we've talked about people pleasing. Those lines can get blurred real quick if we're not careful. So I'm just trying to think through, how do we effectively be all things to all people without trying to please everybody in the process.
Having a perfect understanding of our identity in Jesus. Tree, come on.
Tree, that's the next segment. You're jumping ahead, man.
How much do you need to edit out? Because I just about.
No, you're good. You're good. No, that's an awesome question. I mean, that's really, I mean, the foundation issue that we're trying to deal with. And I do think maybe we will get at some of that next week. Before we close this out, because I know we don't have a ton of time, are there other insecurities of a youth worker you guys thought of? Anything specific that you feel like didn't get mentioned, even if it overlaps a little bit from some of what we've already said? Any others?
I have so many. I think just being the low man on the totem pole, usually youth minister is the one who has the least amount of say in, whatever situation. I think being old in youth ministry, I'm 35 and feel like I'm a grandpa compared to my students. And so there's some insecurity there about that. And just, are they going to like me? Am I too old? Am I too out of touch? That kind of stuff. I could talk for a long time about, just all my insecurities.
Yeah, no, but yeah, both of those resonate for me as well, for sure. Yeah, being too old in youth ministry, also feeling like the low man on the totem pole. And I mean, I felt that, and I was in great church where, our senior pastor, I'm thinking specifically, was always treating me like an equal pastor and, in front of the session as well as the congregation, but still kind of feeling that.
Yeah, same for me. I mean, Les, our senior pastor, has always tried to give me a voice, will ask me my opinion in session meetings and stuff like that. But I just feel like I'm the low man on the totem pole. It's not necessarily something that other people have projected onto me. Maybe it's just a feeling of my insecurities that's making me feel that way.
Yeah. Well, just a couple more minutes. Tree, did you have any others you want to throw out there that haven't been mentioned?
We've kind of already talked about it, but I think just the whole idea of failure or incompetence, like we don't like other people knowing when we failed. So I think oftentimes that leads us to either try and hide or even try to like butter things up when they don't need to be. So we're not great at embracing our failure and learning from it. So I think a lot of times it can just feed into more insecurity when we dwell on the things we don't do well, or the things that we're just flat out not good at. I mean, there are things I think I do relatively well in my job, and there are things I'm like, I have been trying for almost a decade to get better at this, and I'm just not very good at it. And that insecurity can keep you from, the fear of failure keep you from trying anything. Yeah. Exactly.
Yeah, there's that security of doing what's familiar. Excuse me. Yeah, and just continuing to just kind of plod along and do what's safe. So no, that's excuse me, that's a good word. Look, we'll continue this next week, talking hopefully about some helpful ways to deal with our insecurities. All right, I'm back with Brett and Kurt. We are going to be talking about Bluey. And really, it's due in part because of Brett's article that he wrote for the Gospel Coalition entitled Bluey's Beautiful Conservatism. I say it's due in part to that article. It's also due in part to the fact that we're three fathers and we also love Bluey. And I knew for sure, I was excited that Brett was enthusiastic about wanting to jump on and talk about this. And then Kurt, I knew he would want to jump on as well. Maybe just kind of generally speaking, to kind of kick off this conversation before we get into some of the specifics of your article, Brett, what do you like most about Bluey? That's just, it can be a lot of things. I mean, I know we can point to a lot of different things, and your article does that as well. But when you think of the show Bluey, what is it that just kind of comes to the surface of it? This is kind of the thing that I love the show for. Who wants to start off on that?
Yeah, I can start. I think there's a lot that I love about it. And the thing that probably I love the most about it is just how celebratory it is of family. Like, it's not just like teaching you lessons about family in kind of a didactic way, like honor your mother and father, or be nice, be respectful, like those sort of moralizing lessons. It's genuinely like a joyful depiction of family. Like it's the fun of the show is like watching a family have fun being a family, and the infectious, I think, nature of why people gravitate to it is because there's something beautiful about that, and aspirational about it. I know as a dad, I watch the show and I'm kind of, at times I'm like, man, like Bluey's dad is a high bar. Like, I don't know if I can ever be that involved and playful and like all these things, but I kind of want to be, and I should want to be, I should want to cultivate a family environment like what I see on this show. And so I think that's a good thing. And it's a beautiful thing to watch that.
Mm-hmm.
On top of that, not only is it celebratory of the family, and it doesn't beat you over the head with the lessons, but I thought that was, I couldn't agree more with that. But also it's just wholesome. And I mean that in the most complimentary way that I can mean that word. Sometimes that word can take on some different connotations depending upon what you're talking about, or it can even be kind of like a joke, but not this, not Bluey. Bluey is wholesome. This is what my wife and I talk about all the time. It's just wholesome fun. Like it is life affirming fun. Speaking as someone who occasionally makes a joke or two, there's not very much sarcasm. There's irony, but there's not very much sarcasm. There's not very much cynicism, and there's even some commentary on cynicism and sarcasm in some ways, not direct again, but that's what I like about it. And on top of that, I have two children, two boys, one 11 and one 5. And my 11-year-old and I have laughed just as hard at, it's good. It's wholesome and it's good on multiple levels. All right. Mm-hmm. There's obviously, Toy Story and Pixar have kind of written the book on hiding adult jokes in children's programming, and that's not what I mean by Bluey. Well, by what Bluey does, but I think Bluey, you can just appreciate it as a parent, but you can also appreciate it as an older child, and you can appreciate it as a younger child. So those are just some of the things I like about it. I'm sure we could go on.
Oh yeah, for sure. And I want to kind of zero in on some of those points y'all were just talking about. I think maybe just some of the subtleties in it. Like I'm thinking of the specific episode, and I'm already forgetting the name. Is it Granddad or Grandpa or Granddaddy? Which
something like that. The grandfather character.
Yeah. And not only is that, I'll go ahead and say it, one of the episodes that makes my eyes water. Okay. Just because of the story. But if you notice the character of the grandfather, just how slowly he moves throughout that episode, there's little nuances to kind of show the aging that takes place, and him not being able to climb down the hill as fast, or him talking about his thumbs, and just, a weighty subject of mortality being spoken of in a children's show. That's amazing. But I think kind of going along with some of what you were saying, Kurt, and really what we're all saying is, the thing I think I love about it the most, kind of broadly speaking, not only is it a show my entire family can watch together, kind of the wholesomeness, but it's a show my entire family enjoys watching together. And those are two different things. Me and my wife, we're sitting there, we're enjoying it, but then my 15-year-old is enjoying it, and then all the way down to my 6-year-old, and all of us are enjoying different aspects of it. And that's a difficult feat to pull off for any storyteller, any creative. So yeah, those are just a few things. Y'all can kind of react to that, jump back in, zero in on some of those other things.
I was just want to say, before Brett says anything else, he was talking about the aspirational character of Bandit. I was actually watching Bluey today. My children are homesick, and I'm home with them. And so we were watching Bluey today, and I was just thinking in my mind, was Bandit a member of an improv troupe at some point? Yeah. That's how he just commits to the bit Yeah. They both parents do, Chili and Bandit do, but they just commit to the bit in such a way that like I feel like I need a theater degree to be able to do some of the stuff that they pull off. So I really appreciate you saying that.
Yeah. And Brett, maybe something too you could that I know you talk about in the article is it's kind of more show instead of tell, that it doesn't just give you the lessons of, hey kids, here's what we're learning today. Kind of the subtleties there. Why don't you talk about that a little bit more?
Yeah, I mean, I think that's a really noticeable difference between Bluey and other kids shows. Like my boys like to watch like Daniel Tiger a lot, which is a sweet show, and there's good things about it, but it's very like, hey, this is the lesson we're learning, how to go potty, how to like, be respectful, whatever. And it's just not enjoyable for parents, and it's just, I think it diminishes the value of just imagination and narrative and story, to just always go to the point or the lesson. I don't know. It demeans the value of story in its own right. So what Bluey does well is that each episode is a standalone little story, kind of a short film of sorts, with with an arc, a story arc, and it's fun to watch and it's entertaining. And usually there just so happens to be some sort of subtle virtue that is being modeled, or usually it's just a general sense of respecting one another and helping one another, whether it's Bandit and Chili serving each other as husband and wife, stepping in to like fill the gaps around the house, or even the siblings serving one another, and so it's more subtle, but it's there for sure. And I feel like that's more powerful, honestly. Like when kids pick up virtue and they don't even notice that they're picking it up, because it's just, they're more engrossed in the story and the characters, and that it makes it compelling without them being told, you have to like act this way.
That's a good point. Yeah. So maybe too, this will get us to kind of unpack more of what we like about it. I mean, we're three believers. We love Jesus, but it's interesting to me how the broader culture also, like, this show is resonating with them as well. Because I would assume as we talk more and more, we're going to point to some biblical reasons why we love this show. But I mean, on IMDb, if you go to IMDb, the show has a 9.7 rating, which is pretty unheard of. And I don't give a lot of credence to a lot of the rating systems, I know, because people can kind of tamper with those. But Sleepy Time, which is my favorite episode, is that yours too, Kurt?
100%. It's number one.
Yeah,
well,
so
I'm sorry. It's number two. It's number two.
Okay. Well, we might unpack that too, but it's got a 9.9 rating, by the way, which is crazy. I mean, NPR has done an article on Bluey, the New York Times, Washington Post, the blue heeler dogs that are kind of depicted in the show. There's a massive surge in sales over those dogs because of this show. Why is the culture talking about this show so much? Why, again, I mean, Brett, you wrote an article on the show. Kurt, you can jump in, but I'd just love to kind of get some thoughts there.
Well, I was just going to say, before, Brett's probably knows more about this than I do, so I'm going to let the uninformed voice go first, and then he can correct me. But I would say, one, there are no politics in Bluey. And that doesn't mean they don't talk about politics, because they do. There's actually an episode on voting, where they go to vote. And of course, in Australia, you're legally required to vote. So it's natural that they would talk about that. It's a national holiday, and everyone is legally required to vote. So there are no politics either way, right? There's no, there's no right wing, propaganda, but there's also no left wing propaganda. But the second thing is that I think one of the reasons why why Christians might also like it is they also have episodes about Easter and Christmas. Now they don't, directly lean into Christianity. They don't talk about Jesus per se, but they also don't ignore them. And they're also not going out of their way to do other holidays as well. There's no I'm not saying this is wrong. I'm just saying they don't do Kwanzaa. They don't do Ramadan. They don't do Yom Kippur. They don't do, like, you see what I'm saying? So I think Christians like it because it's a recognition. And I think maybe I need to know more about Australia to understand why that's the case. But I think Christians like that. But I think the culture as a whole likes it because all the stuff that we disagree over kind of gets pushed to the side with Bluey.
Yeah, I would agree with that. I think the like a noticeable lack of politically correct impulses to like have token characters representing this and that and checking all the boxes, and that's just refreshing because I think our culture is a little bit exhausted right now with how everything, from kids entertainment to the NFL to sports have been politicized, and it kind of sucks the fun out of it a little bit. This is just an entertaining show that is celebrating what is good about a family and a very specific family in a very specific place, Australia, Brisbane, Australia. And that's another thing that I think works for the show is the specificity of its setting. The best art in general, I think, leans into its specificity, but in a way that has universal resonance. So it doesn't feel like a vague, I don't know, just kind of something that doesn't exist in reality. Like this show, even though it's dogs and, talking, it's obviously not reality, but aspects of it feel real. Like this could be a real family in Australia living in the 21st century. And I think people recognize themselves in the show, parents. And the one thing I think it does really well is captures the changing dynamic of modern parenthood, where, you're more likely to have both parents working at least part-time, and, the old, very defined domestic roles of like the mom does all the domestic chores and the dad just, comes home like, leave it to Beaver with his briefcase at the end of the day from work. That's just not the modern family, especially post-COVID, where people work from home for the most part. So I recognize myself in the show. I'm someone who works from home. And so my kids are always around me, even when I'm doing my job, and everything is just more fluid. Like if I want to take a break from my job and go play in the bounce house outside in our backyard, I will with my kids, and same with my wife. So I think there's a recognition that the show offers that people in the 21st century can relate to.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, no, that's a good point. And
hold on.
Yeah,
I want to interrupt real quick because I think Brett just admitted that he and his wife like to go play in the bounce house. Is that what I heard?
I do. My wife will never be caught dead in the bounce house, but
she's
we
anti.
play. My boys like me to like pretend like I'm a dinosaur, like trying to get them in the bounce house. So that's like my best Bluey, my best bandit like behavior.
One more thing I was going to say. One thing I really like that Brett just said about the show is the specificity of it. And I think I can't speak for the people who made it, but I feel like that is a direct choice, a purposeful choice in opposition to some of the more famous cartoons that are located in what would be called like Anytown, USA, or Anytown, wherever. You think about The Simpsons, obviously not a children's show, but Springfield, they're very specific. They don't know where Springfield is. I guess Family Guy, another they're in some town, and it's not a specific town in a specific state in a specific place. And I think that's very interesting that they made that choice. And I would love to hear why the people who made the show decide to do that. But anyway, I just think it's really interesting. Sorry, John, I interrupted.
No, that's a good point. I'm glad you zeroed in on it. Going to your article, Brett, and this is more kind of the origins of your article. And again, reminding our listeners, Bluey's Beautiful Conservatism is the article, and that will be linked in our show notes. How long had this article kind of been churning in your mind and thinking, okay, I want to write about Bluey. What's the angle to take to discuss this show? Just kind of give us some of those origins and kind of first thoughts.
Yeah, actually, I hadn't heard of Bluey, or I had heard of it, but I hadn't watched it until a couple of months ago. And my kids are still a little too young, I would say. Like my oldest is just old enough to kind of be interested in Bluey. So it just hasn't been on our radar as a family. But my boss, Colin Hansen, he like said, "Hey, have you heard of Bluey? Like, I think you would like it. Your kids might like it, but I think you would like it as an adult. And I'd be interested in you writing about the show for TGC." So it was kind of an assignment, from Colin to start watching the show a little bit and think about writing about it. And sure enough, I really loved it. And anytime I sit down to write about a movie or a TV show, I don't know at the outset, like what the angle is going to be, like, what am I going to say about this? That kind of emerges as I watch it and think about it over time. So it was probably like over a month of like watching the show as often as I could. The nice thing about Bluey is that each episode is like 6 to 8 minutes long. Mm-hmm. So you can kind of watch an episode or two whenever you are sitting down to have lunch or just want to break from other things. So I watched, I think, the first 2 seasons, like for the most part, before I started writing the article. And then, and then I knew pretty clearly like what I wanted to say by the time I had watched that amount of the show. So.
Yeah, it was a big deal when season 3 came out for our family. We had kind of made a day of it. We said, okay, look, and we didn't watch the whole season in one sitting, but we said no one can watch any episodes without the entire family. And we sat down and it was great. Oh yeah. I'd love to hear from the two of you. How has Bluey impacted your families? We've kind of talked about a little bit of that. Bandit making us feel bad for being bad fathers. Just kidding. Kurt, you've got your hand up. Go ahead and talk about that a little bit.
Okay. So one of the things that we have been trying to do is to get our children to clean up more after themselves and to give away things that they don't use. And just the other day, they had some friends over and our playroom was an absolute travesty. It was just wrecked. I was like, guys, you made this mess and you're going to clean it up. I said, but we're going to clean up this way. We're going to make 2 piles. We're going to make a pile of stuff that we still play with. And then we're going to make a pile of stuff that we don't really play with that much. And a third pile, of things that are broken that we can't give away. We got to throw away. And they didn't really want to do it at first. And then I started telling them, kind of coach them to do it or whatever. And immediately my 5-year-old, said, "Oh, this is like that Bluey episode where the Mr. Monkey Jocks." One of my top 10 episodes is that this is like Mr. Monkey Jocks where they didn't want to give away. My 5-year-old, not my 11-year-old was like, yeah, this, he kind of knew immediately, but that's something. So, anyway, I would have done that regardless of Bluey, but my 5-year-old kind of got into it because it was something that he had seen modeled for him in a show that he likes. And so that was a really kind of cool moment where Bluey like jumped into our life for a second. So,
yeah. Brett, do you have any examples?
Yeah, I was thinking about the episode on season 3, Rain, which is probably in my like top 5 episodes of Bluey. Yeah. It's a brilliant episode artistically. There's hardly any dialogue at all. It's like almost like a silent film. It's just like a rainstorm, and Bluey is doing this creative activity, trying to like direct the runoff water in a certain way. But at the whole episode, Chili, the mom, is trying to like basically not have a mess inside the house with Bluey coming in and out. But at the end, she like realizes actually like being a part of this experience with my daughter is the most important thing. The mess will be cleaned up later. Like I need to stop worrying about that and start being present with Bluey. And so she joins her in the like activity at the very end. And it really moved me because it, in a very subtle way, again, not didactic. They're not like saying, parents, this is the lesson for you. They showed it rather than telling it, but it hit home because, when you work from home, as I do, you can be pretty rigid about like boundaries, like, no, Chet, this is daddy's time. I have to work. I have to like do my work. And I know you want to play with me, and you want to like go to the bounce house or like hop on daddy's back and pretend like you're riding a horse, whatever. Like, and sometimes it is good to just have those boundaries. Otherwise I would never get work done. But it has made me just more aware of how valuable presence is with children in their formation, and more powerful than telling my kids, I want you to be this way, I want you to cherish these virtues, is to just be with them and to kind of have my presence be a gift that, can't be replaced with anything else. Like, I can't turn on a show and have that form of my child, but I can give them my presence. And so, yeah, I think the show Bluey reminds me of that often. Like, be interruptible, give your kids the gift of your playful presence, entering their world, and that's invaluable. And that's something that in the modern age with technology, parents can so easily get drawn into their devices. And that's the last thing I want to do as a parent. I don't want to be the parent who's like scrolling on my phone when my kids are like, tapping me on the shoulder to want to go play, and I'm like too busy with my head buried in my device or my computer. And so that's just a very honest, very real challenge that I'm facing as someone who works on my phone and my computer at home all the time with my kids around me. I would guess there's other people out there in today's world who are facing that challenge as well. So it's hard, but I think we have to find ways to be present with our kids when they need us to be.
Yeah, for sure. And that's a point in the article that I liked. You said kind of watching it aspirationally, it kind of pushes us to, like you said, get off of our devices and actually strive to be a parent that's involved. And it's interesting how we're showing them a show to kind of do that, but it can be used in that way. Yes.
But the brevity of the show actually leads itself to that,
absolutely.
Right?
Yeah, for sure.
The fact that the show is only, if you skip, I encourage my children not to skip the beginning because you need to let it load or buffer or whatever. But if you skip, it's 7 minutes.
Yeah.
You skip it 7 minutes. And so the brevity of the show, now you could just stack them. And that's what we've been doing when we've been sick, is watching them over and over again, but they don't want to play. They were laying on the couch, pitiful. But anyway, the brevity of the show actually leads itself to those things. Mm-hmm. And I don't know where we're going to go from here, John, but at some point, are we going to talk about what are the best episodes in our opinion?
Sure. Yeah. We'll do it for sure. I was going to say, just kind of how it's impacted our family. We've definitely played Keepy Uppy. I don't know if y'all played that.
we played that. I love that name for it.
It's the best.
That's an Australia-ism that I'm going to take and run with.
For sure.
Yeah, there's a ton of, I was going to say, one of the things that makes Bluey so cool is the Australian-centric terminology that
Biscuits,
you learn.
Right? So fun.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Biscuits. That's one.
Dunny.
It's funny to hear just my younger children, especially when they get frustrated at something, I'll just hear in the other room, biscuits. And that just makes me laugh. And then Trifical.
My 5-year-old tells me so-and-so is not playing properly. Which is so funny to hear.
All right. Well, let's go ahead and do some of the favorite episodes, and then we'll end with some other things. So favorite episodes. I've already kind of said Sleepy Time is, I think, my number one. If I had to pick a number one, Rain for sure. Just the creativity of that. Granddad would be one of those. Grannies is also just really funny. That's one. But Kurt, Brett, whoever wants to jump in, favorite episodes.
I can go first. I have 10. I did some research. Look, I've just been watching it today, right? So I know, but I have like different categories, like the ones where the lesson of the show is really about how to parent are ones. So like, that's like Chest, which is, a lot of people don't like that episode, but it's a, or Dunny, is about that. It's about how you parent, or Baby Race, which is where Chili kind of talks about the struggles of when your kid doesn't match the milestones of other kids. An amazing episode, in my opinion. And then you got the kind where the point of the show or the episode is that the relationships matter. And like that would be like Christmas Swim or Smoochie Kiss, which just got added to Disney, but I've seen it off. They added it back. Disney had originally eliminated that one, but those are just.
Wait, why did they eliminate that?
I'm not sure. I had to go back and look, but 2 episodes from season 3 just got added back.
Fascinating.
Smoochie Kiss and Family Meeting. Now, Family Meeting is about flatulence, so I think it's about Bandit accidentally. They call it fluffing, so accidentally fluffing in Bluey's face. It's actually but anyway. But and then they're the we've already talked about Rain and Sleepy Time. Oh God Beyond All Praising. I know that's not the name, but I was actually doing a wedding where the bride was going to come out to that, and right before I left to go do the wedding, my kids were watching Bluey, and it was that episode, and that song was playing, and I was like, this is unbelievable. It was like emotional. But my number one favorite episode, 100% unimpeachable, in my opinion, is Unicourse. Unicourse is just every one of my family was laughing to tears at Unicourse. So love that one. Anyway, those are just some of them. I didn't even name all 10 of them, but those are the ones I like. Y'all named several of them as well.
Yeah, that's good. Brett, any of your favorite episodes?
Yeah, most of them have already been mentioned. The one that I haven't heard that I really like is Camping. Do you guys remember that one? It's just an example of like a really like adult idea that the show captures for parents, like, and it's the idea of everyone has that experience of a friend that you make that's like brief and then gone, and the pain, the kind of existential ache of community that we long for that is sometimes ephemeral, and yet at the end of the episode, in the last like shot, you see that they see each other again. Bluey and this French boy, I'm forgetting his name, but yeah, so I thought that was a really sweet episode. I like the ones where the relationship of the parents is kind of foregrounded, and that's something I talk about in the article, is just how a healthy marriage, it shouldn't be something we ever take for granted in TV, because it's a rare thing in the TV landscape to see like a really beautiful, healthy marriage. And the episode Fancy Restaurant, I really enjoyed, where they kind of do a mock restaurant in the house and the kids serve food, and it's really funny because it's gross food that the kids come up with, and yet it's it's an episode that celebrates like parents should still date each other even in the hectic craziness of raising kids, and here's one way that you could do that with your kids present. So
also one we haven't mentioned that I just remembered because you said that is Fairy Tale, which is in season 3, and that's where we go back to the 80s and we find out that Bandit was not a very good brother. He tells the story. Okay, it's a true fairy tale. Amazing episode for people like us, obviously, because we actually remember the 80s, and that's funny, but also just because it's a dad being honest about the fact that he was not a hero all the time, which he certainly is to his daughters. And I thought that was a really cool episode.
Yeah, no, that's good. We don't have too much longer, but I was just curious too. What has been the reaction to your article, Brett? Have you heard a lot of support from it? Have you heard any pushback? I know TGC reaches a broad spectrum, so just curious what the reaction has been.
Yeah, I think it's been generally well received, and I think a lot of people were, super excited to see Bluey, celebrated in the way that I did in the article. There's always some people on the more progressive side of the spectrum, let's say, who react negatively when I talk about things like Peppa Pig and how its introduction of a same-sex character as an example of how our culture is, using children's entertainment to introduce political ideas that parents, Christian parents don't love. I know I don't love that. We love Peppa Pig in our household, but I'm like less inclined to have that be a show that we have on. And so anyway, I think people who don't see a same-sex children's character as a problem reacted negatively to kind of claiming Bluey as a quote show about beautiful conservatism. Yeah.
And it's interesting too, that, I mean, we're sitting here, we're talking about this show, and I mean, yeah, I think you said earlier, Brett, I think it was you, of just no politics being involved in this and how refreshing this is. And you think of how successful this show is, and then you also think of Top Gun Maverick, and similar things were said about that show. The fact that the enemy that they're fighting against was just kind of a faceless enemy, and they didn't get specific in that, and that was an intentional choice. That was massively successful. Kurt, what are your thoughts there, Kurt? You're making
that's because at the beginning of Top Gun Maverick, he dies in that plane test, and the rest of it is a dream of how he wanted his life to go.
I've definitely
Some
heard
people
that.
Suggest.
Yeah, I've heard that theory.
But that's why, because in dreams things are not specific like that. So
yeah, that's true.
Who knows?
So that's
who can say, John?
A podcast for another time. So look, as we're drawing this to a close, I'm just curious too. I don't know if this is a good place to end or not, but if you could sit down with the creators of this show and give them advice for kind of the future of the show, because I know some of your article, we're thinking, okay, is this going to go in a certain direction? Is it going to kind of fold to some of the pressures of the culture? As you highlight an article that does kind of call it to do that. What's some advice you would give to the creators of Bluey? Brett, do you want to go first? Kurt, do you want to go? Who wants to jump in?
Yeah, I'll jump in. I would just say what I said in the article, like, don't go the way of the cultural pressure to make Bluey politically correct in every way. And I linked in my article to an article that was saying, like, I love Bluey, but like, let's like bring more diversity of representation to Bluey. Let's introduce, queer dogs and, dogs of different ethnicities, which like, I'm like, how do you have different, how do you have different genders and ethnicities? Like the show already has like different dog breeds. Every character pretty much is a different dog breed. Anyway, it's just that I read the show's creators respond to that particular writer in that critique, and I was encouraged by how they responded, because they essentially said, look, Bluey is not a political show. We have no interest in turning it into a political show. We're just wanting to make a beautiful children's show, about this specific family of dogs. And so that gave me hope that they're on the right track. So the only thing I would say is just carry on and do what you've done that has made this show so successful, and don't burden the show with this kind of political weight. Just let it be a good narrative.
Yeah, I would second Brett. Just keep going. No token characters. Token characters, they're actually a disservice to whoever you think you're offering representation to.
Yeah.
It's like it's really kind of a slap in the face to minorities of any kind, whatever, however you want to define that. It really is. And I would say, and that's the beautiful thing about being dogs, right? Because there are no, same-sex dogs, or, and race is not even an issue, because dogs are of all these different breeds. And I mean, I can't even think of a breed of dog that's not. So you kind of, in a genius way, they have kind of sidestepped all of that. I would say my only bit of advice is don't be afraid to end it. A lot of good art, because I mean, how many Fast and Furious movies are there? I'm not saying they're bad either, but at some point we've
Mhm.
seen the car go through. We've seen what else can you do? It's like a car fights a submarine. It's like, okay, well,
Yeah.
whatever. One of those things has an intercontinental ballistic missiles on it. Uh, but yeah, I would say don't be afraid. Don't be afraid to end it. And to say, okay, the ideas are not as good as they used to be, and now we just need to say, okay, that's good for Bluey. Let's do something different. So a lot of our shows have gone on that we've really liked have gone on several seasons too long. Just watch when Steve Carell left the office. That would be my example. They should have killed it. They should have killed it right there, and they didn't. And don't let that happen to Bluey. So.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I've got nothing to add. That was well said by the two of you. I am curious how many more seasons it will have, and two, you just think of how successful this show is. Cannot imagine the pressure the creators have now that this is a hit. Now that kind of the spotlight is on it to kind of keep this going. That's just a lot of creative pressure. So it'll be interesting to see where it goes. But Kurt, Brett, really appreciate you two taking the time to come on and to talk about Bluey. Enjoyed this discussion. And again, reminding everyone to check out Brett's article at the Gospel Coalition.
Oh, come and buy without money. Oh, come and feast without pay. For the King has opened his banquet hall to the beggar, the outcast, and the slave. For the King has opened his banquet hall to the beggar,